2. Friends of the Gathering in the Miami Valley, welcome back. Good to have you for another podcast. I'm excited today to have a couple of my friends, a couple of my heroes of the faith, of many things. We got Caleb Ingram, who's with Declare, and he can tell you more about that in a minute. And then my friend Tony Miltenberger from Restoration at Centerville and the Reclamation Podcast. I always want to add another word in there to mess it up and put Reclamation Project, Restoration. Can
I tell you a funny story? So the reason that it's called the Reclamation Podcast is because when we were talking about naming the church, I wanted to call it the Reclamation Church, but everyone told me it was a horrible name for a church. So I told everybody in a very mature way that fine, I'll just do it my way and I'll just call the podcast the Reclamation Podcast. So people get it confused all the time because they're so similar.
Do people ever do a search for Reclamation Church then? Reclamation Centerville?
Not that they've told me.
Not that they've told you. I do have to think about those. Something. Plus, around here, you got last podcast we had on Chad Group, who's at Restoration Church in New Carlisle, Restoration Park Church. So for me in my head, I got to play with all those words and think now, is Tony Project, Podcast, Reclamation, Restoration
Hardware? Is that you too?
Right, that's us too.
Any R word.
I'd be fine with their profit margin.
Exactly. So Caleb, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Ty, maybe the 2 or 3 minute testimony version, and then how you are doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I kind of shared with you a little bit earlier, was on staff at a church, full-time worship pastor there, and another church moved in.
Which church was that in Troy you were at again?
I was at Grace Baptist Church in Troy.
Okay, because now you go to the Valley, right?
Yes, yep. Actually been doing a house church as part of the Valley lately, but that's another story. So anyways.
Churches and titles tied to who you are.
So anyways, church moved in down the street. This is years ago, and I just remember at our staff meeting, there was kind of the sense of like, oh my goodness, there's another church over there. They're kind of cool. What if people leave our church and go to their church? And just kind of got my wheels turning on things that I'd already been thinking about, but really helped me solidify it. Like, wait a second, this is not how God designed the body of Christ to operate. Like, the other churches aren't our competitors for some market share. The other churches are our partners in seeing the gospel and the kingdom of God go forth in our cities and our lives and in our community. So that led a journey of me and some friends launching Declare, which the mission of it, the vision is uniting God's church to declare his glory, see lives and communities transformed. So we're not a local church. We're not starting a local church. We're not a food pantry. We're not a service provider. We connect and unite these different churches and organizations to serve and collaborate together in a way that changes lives and brings God glory in the process.
And talk a little bit about your testimony, like how'd you come to Christ? Obviously, there's ties to Cedarville. The list goes on.
Yeah, so my parents, they love the Lord, grew up in New Hampshire. They planted a church in our house. So kind of saw life as a follower of Jesus, even in ministry firsthand. One cool experience for me was because they planted a church in our home, this whole idea of getting wrapped up with the building being the church, I never had that issue. When I actually moved out here, more kind of Bible Belt feel, in my opinion, from New Hampshire to here.
Sure.
And I saw people like, this is my church, it's this building. Well, actually, one of my first experiences, I drove by these churches that had a couple hundred people, like, there's so many big churches out here, because that wasn't the case out there. But anyway, so just growing up with my parents, setting that example, came to know the Lord, ended up at Cedarville, was how I landed here.
Are your parents still in New Hampshire?
I have some siblings still in New Hampshire. They're actually now in Cape Cod.
So I think it's so interesting to look at places like New Hampshire and California, because what we're seeing there is eventually what's going to happen to the Midwest and the de-churching. It was like God prepared you for COVID life before COVID was even a thing.
There you go.
New Hampshire almost seems like it's kind of foreign. Like, it was funny when I did Young Life, one of the years we took kids to camp, the guy who was the camp speaker was like the first guy to get Young Life going in New Hampshire. And he wasn't that old, and it wasn't that long ago. And you're like, what? Like, he's the only guy doing Young Life in New Hampshire? What?
Yeah, I mean, so around us, like there were like maybe 10 churches we knew of within, I don't know, a 30-minute drive radius. Okay. Here you could drive and turn a corner, there's more churches.
Right.
Well, and you know, it's funny about that, maybe before you get into who you are in your story a little bit, Tony, I was thinking about that the other day being at your church. I was thinking, man, I know Jason Bunger over there, so I could go by his place. You got Southbrook, you got Fairhaven. Obviously, you and I are both friends with Chris Williams. I'm like, that story that Caleb kind of talks about here's the other church. Obviously, us being friends with Chris, he just got the new building and all that stuff. How do you kind of do business? Because you're very much a team player, and Centerville's obviously bigger than Troy. how do you kind of wrestle with that?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that in Centerville, there's 4 Methodist churches. We're part of the Methodist denomination. There's at least 4 Methodist churches. And within 10 minutes of my church, there are at least 3 churches that worship over 1,000, right? And Restoration, where I get to serve, we're nowhere close to that, thankfully, and we're perfectly okay. And the truth is we just really believe in the kingdom message, very similar to what Declare does. You know, we want to help people walk with Christ in whatever season they're in, for however long God leads them to us, right? And then eventually people will outgrow us, or people will decide that they don't like whatever it is I'm preaching or teaching, or insert X reason here, and people will move on. And our prayer is not that they come back to our church, but our prayer is that they continue to follow God, right, and follow Christ. And I'm just a big believer that if we can keep people moving as they follow Christ, that's one of the things that really frustrates me about a lot of what's happened in church, right? In American church, we've done a really great job of teaching people to go to church, but a horrible job of teaching people to follow Jesus. Yeah. Because following Jesus isn't static, right? And so you should be growing. So the way that you follow Jesus today should be different a year from now, and that's certainly been the case in my story.
But when you talk about promoting a church, I would think you better than anybody have a great opportunity to say, "Hey, we're right on your way. You go to Bill's Donuts. We're right past there.
Right.
And if you want a great lunch, you got City Barbecue right there.
And Graders.
And then you go to Graders.
Right.
I mean, who can sell that better than you can? I mean, you got an advantage.
Listen, I'm going to be honest
with
you. If City Barbecue, if they're watching, if they did brisket breakfast tacos,
oh my goodness,
take all my money. Just take it all, because they're smoking meat at 7:30 in the morning as I'm walking into the building, and I'm like, is this heaven? It's amazing. It's amazing.
So I really should have came in here, heard Sam Sunday morning, not Saturday night, because the brisket was already done cooking at that point.
100%.
So talk more about your story, military background, whatnot that way. Give us the short synopsis of you.
Yeah, so I get to serve as the pastor at Restoration Church in Centerville. I'm so thankful for the opportunity to serve there. I've got 3 beautiful kids, married my high school sweetheart. I grew up a cradle Catholic and graduated from Chaminade Julienne in Dayton, Ohio. Go Eagles. Yep. And that was class of 99. And I enlisted in the Army in between my junior and senior year. And so 3 days after I graduated, I left for the Army Reserves and had the opportunity to serve as a chaplain's assistant. And much like what Declare does, my job in the Army was to connect people to expressions of faith. And it was a tremendous opportunity to do God's work. And I was deployed from 04 to 05 in Kuwait. And the chaplain I was assigned to was a full gospel chaplain, a mentor of mine, a dear friend, Bishop Milton Herring, an incredible man of the faith. And he challenged everything I thought I knew about worship. It was the first time I'd ever been somewhere and somebody stood up in the middle of a sermon and started giving a hand praise, and just really going, I was going to take my rifle and butt stroke them in the head, right? Like that was part of my play, because Catholic, sit, stand, kneel, repeat. But he came up to me and he was like, now, young man, and he was just this incredible leader. He was like, young man, if I'm telling you that God will show up anywhere that you let him. And I was like, let's go. Let's go. And that was a great year. And God really did incredible things in my life and eventually led me into ministry and was discipled by some incredible men along the way.
If I've told you this, so one of the first people we had speak, it was the one year we did not do a breakfast. We did a dinner on a Saturday night, tied it into Cedarville University so this guy could come speak at graduation. We had U.S. Senate Chaplain Barry Black, who was previously the first African-American Navy chaplain.
Okay.
And ever since that experience, reading a couple of his books, I'm a huge fan and love that kind of military pastoring mindset, if you will, with that. And I'm sure, I can't imagine you go through the military and have any experience with one of those chaplains that you're not changed. Whether you end up following Jesus or not, I'm just sure that they make a big difference.
Just an incredible group of professionals who, to your point, kind of what we're here to talk about today, who use their platform in such a unique and intentional way.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So platform. So, I often say, and I think you guys agree with this, we've all got a platform. We're all a brand, whether we want to embrace that or not. Some people poo-poo that and say, well, I don't. I'm not a brand like you think of like General Motors or whatever, Keebler or whoever it is. There's the Caleb brand, there's the Tony brand, there's the Jeff brand. We obviously like podcasting. That's a thing we do. Caleb, I think definitely uses Facebook and other things well. Really, if someone said, so what's Caleb's brand? He's a unifier. He's clearly about Jesus making him known, declaring the gospel, declaring God's glory, blah, 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 blah. How do you guys both, well, maybe Tony, let's start with you on this one. How do you define, think through, plug away at your platform? And how do you define your own platform?
Well, that's a big question. So I think that we have to kind of get back to the root of this idea. A platform is what you stand on to deliver a message. And so as I think about this and have kind of prayed about our conversation today, the two questions that I wanted to start off with asking myself, and I'd love to hear Caleb's answers too, like is...
You're better than me at questions, so we might go with what you have to say over me.
Well, it's whose platform are you standing on, and what message are you giving? Right? Whose platform are you standing on, and what message are you giving? And that's true if you're a business owner or if you're my 15-year-old son, right? Whose platform are you standing on, and whose message are you giving? And as I begin to think about my own brand and what I feel like God has called me to in online ministry or whatever, those are the things that I want to wrestle with. So how has this platform come to be? Who's given me this platform? Well, God's given it to me, right, first and foremost. And then the church, which reinforces a lot of my opportunities, is there. And then some of the writing I've been able to do, the education, the people. So when I stand on my platform, I'm standing on first God's calling on my life, and then all the people who put me there. Right? And that becomes a really great filter to check messages.
Oh, yeah.
Because now I'm like, well, would Chaplain Herring approve of this message? Would Chaplain Causey, would my dad approve of this message?
I approve of this message.
Right. Well, and hey, sometimes we need a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Right? And then what message are you giving? Right? And so I believe that so many of us have a unique viewpoint on how God has touched our lives, that at the intersection of our gifting and pain is probably a message that needs to get out.
Say that again. That's something people need to hear.
At the intersection of our calling and pain is where the message needs to get out. And for
Tony,
me,
real quick, Caleb, how does that hit you? What he just said there about at the point of pain and calling is where the message needs to get out.
And I think that's where the reality of life hits. Like anybody can say some cute leadership phrases or even write a book about something, but in our actual lives, which our platform is a reflection of who we actually are in actual lives, what we live out in those moments says a lot about who we truly are. And if our platform says something that what we do when we hit the pain doesn't do, then people see the hypocrisy there.
So go a little further with where Tony was at, even asking you those questions about, calling, how'd you get the platform, where's it coming from, and the message therein.
Yeah, so to be honest...
I'm curious with you, Caleb, do you even... on one sense, I think you think about it, and on another sense, I think there's, in a very kind of organic, almost naive in a good way, I think you just kind of do it. Like, I sometimes wonder with you, are you really thinking about what you're putting out there? Is this just an overflow of who you are?
So inevitably, I think everybody probably does. So there's times when I'm there, like, should I post this? Should I not post this? I know if I post this topic, these people will like it, those people. So I think we all go there, but I actually try to let that not guide me as much as possible. So I think it's partly a different approach too. So I don't have a specific platform brand I'm trying to create around a podcast per se. If I did, there's questions I would think, what is the purpose of this podcast? Who am I trying to reach? What content? So right now, my main platform in a social media sense is my own personal Facebook page. So it represents Caleb Ingram in a direct sense. And then I've managed some of our Declare.
So someone asks you, here's what are you trying to communicate, or what's kind of your theme? What would you say to that?
Man. So yeah, that's the part I don't know if I put like a mission statement on it. What I try, because it's my personal Facebook page, and this is maybe where if someone's listening, it's like, man, I don't have my own platform. Some of this might resonate with them because I also don't have a platform in that sense, but it's what am I trying to communicate with my life? And essentially, there's lots of things I could put on there, but ultimately, am I adding something that's going to be productive in the conversation? All of us can look on social media and see what's out there. And all of us, I've heard so many people say, man, I just don't even want to go anymore because there's so much junk, there's so much discouragement, there's so much division, there's all of that. So am I contributing something to this world of social media and of Facebook that is building people up, that is actually productive, that is truly informational and helpful? And ultimately, is it bringing God glory in everything I'm doing? Not every post is about God, but that's
I wonder if you were to become divisive on your personal Facebook page, what would be the blowback on your mission to unify the church?
Yeah, well, that's not just the if. So we'll jump right into where we've gone wrong.
Yeah, we talk about it. I can't. It's hard to picture you going wrong. Like, if there's one person I'm like on at least on Facebook, because I don't do a ton with Twitter. I don't really use Instagram much at all. But I'm like, Caleb would never screw up. I mean, literally, I think that.
So for the most part, as part of my brand, I've purposefully avoided just really extreme partisan things.
Tony would screw up before you would, is what I'm saying, really, for honest.
Which I think that's accurate. I think that's very accurate.
So I've consciously thought that and tried not to. However, at least a couple examples I could pull out. Not too long. So, I mean, COVID hit. Everybody's like, what's going on in the world? I let myself get pulled into some of that whole pulling back and forth, and there's this, there's that, and they're trying to do this, and they're trying to do that. Posted a couple of things, kind of expressing some of my concerns with different things that were happening. And it definitely sparked a conversation. And looking back on it, I had to ask myself the question, was that productive? Like, was that, even if I still share some of the same concerns I posted, so it's not necessarily that, man, I don't believe those, like, I share some concerns, but I also realized, especially when things are so emotional, people don't take the time to understand what you're really trying to say. If your post is this long and it's trying to help people think, they read two phrases that talk about this, and like, you don't care and everybody's gonna die and you just don't even care about it. It's like, that's not what I was, anybody that really knows me knows that that's not my heart. But there's also a couple thousand people on Facebook that I'm friends with that don't really know me. And so there's people that trying to have, let's have an honest conversation, look at information, other perspectives. It wasn't received that way. And my conclusion is, not the right venue. People missed the point I was trying to make, and it wasn't helpful. So I wouldn't post it again.
You know what's funny? So Tony shared before we got on here about like how Facebook, an equipping thing here to encourage people listening to, is that like Facebook is looking, if like you use the word podcast or something like that in a post, it might get shut down or played down a little bit because certain words people might think it's going to kick you off to another platform medium. I used the word NBA one time. I had this post and I was basically saying the last 3 games of the NBA playoffs, phenomenal. I'm not making any kind of political post here. I said something like, if you're not watching these games, shame on you. Well, I think the kicker was the word NBA was huge.
Right.
The word shame to some people, and I said it in like all capital letters, so I was clearly trying to be funny. It blew up. I had people messaging me calling some of my friends racist. I had people they were pretty gracious towards me for the most part. But like friends of mine, I had a guy who's out of state who's like, he said, that's why I don't come back to Springfield. He goes, there's this, there's that. And I'm like, whoa. And he was going, Jeff, this is nothing on you. This is just people who are commenting that. So that one got crazy. One time I made a kind of subtle, pleasant kind of thing responding to my relationship with Jesus. A good friend of mine reached out to me and just said, hey, I think what you posted there, I know your intent, but it could have been damaging to this person or whatever. And I deleted it. It was like, I love Jesus type of thing. But it was kind of the tone of it. Could have been, and I'm like, wow, I would have never thought of that. And I took it down. And it wasn't a shame thing like I'm ashamed of Jesus. Right. It was just more like that could have brought damage to so-and-so or whatever. And I thought, okay, take it down.
Part of the problem is I think sometimes we forget that Facebook isn't your platform, right? Facebook and Instagram, I love to use Instagram, right? It's my new favorite platform.
Because you're so young and hip.
No, because people say less stupid things on there.
Oh, really? Is that what it is?
I mean, there's just there's less dialogue. It's not as
less
conducive.
posting like random crazy political articles, right? Like it's like, here's a picture of my
Are you on Instagram much? Or?
No, my wife is. She does stories.
Yeah.
Well, Morgan, she's not goofing up either. Morgan's
She's
never
good. You just follow her on Instagram. It's good. I follow you on Instagram. Well, one of you, and they got cute kids, right?
They do.
But so the thing is,
it was fun seeing them at a concert recently. The whole family.
The whole family.
I noticed Morgan first. I'm like, there's Morgan, Caleb, and the girls.
So the thing is like those outlets that we use to trumpet our platform are not our platform, and they're not our friend. Facebook's not your friend. Right, like regardless of what anybody says.
Is Zuckerberg kicking us off right now because you said that?
Yeah, probably. At least the views are going to go down, right? Or it's going to be censored. But like Instagram's not your friend. Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, none of those places are your friend. They're just a tool. It's a microphone, like a megaphone rather, to get there. And in this particular case, it's a megaphone that requires you to put in a specific code so that they can get what they want. Right. And so, on all of this, the best way to protect yourself is to make sure that you're surrounded by real people who can help hold you accountable, who can call you like a friend, right? Like who can, it's why we all believe in in-person events, Because as much as we appreciate the opportunity to trumpet our platform, it doesn't do the same thing as a friend going, "Are you okay?" Right? And that's just so mission critical. A podcaster that I follow who I have huge respect for, her name is Annie Downs. And one of the things that she says is you need to make sure that you've got a private life outside of your platform, right? And she goes, now private is different than secret, right? A secret life leads to unhealth.
Yeah.
A private life leads to good boundaries.
I think my wife's somewhere saying amen to that. Private.
Yeah, my wife said that too. Make that post private. Why is that post public?
Why is that right? My wife and I, we had to set some boundaries around it because I'm like, I'll put my marital stuff out there in a way that I think is helpful, except I haven't necessarily talked to the other person that's involved in the marriage.
Which would be your wife.
Which would be my wife, right? And she's like, hey, that's got to come down. Like you cannot, there's new rules. There's new rules. You can't post a picture of me without approval, or you can't, like we just got, it's like preaching, right? It's the new preaching, right? I'm not allowed to use my wife in a sermon unless I get the blessing. Right?
Oh, wow.
Because...
Wow. My wife has not done that one, but I don't preach that often, so...
Well, I mean, and part of the problem is sometimes I'll feel like... I'll feel the Holy Spirit. I don't know if it's the Holy Spirit or not, but I'll feel like, oh, this would be a great time to share this story that we haven't fully processed yet that happened 2 days ago. Yeah. It just prevents me from saying something that because once it's out there, I don't care who you are, it can't come back. Like it's out there, right? I tell my 15-year-old this all the time. Whatever you put on social media, be prepared for it to be out there forever.
So do you guys think with my guess is nobody's going on and has a platform to overly be negative, and yet that happens. Like when I asked Caleb earlier, about platform, for me it's simply to add value. I mean, it'd be nice to say, and part of me wants to say, well, like to give God glory, and I want to do that, and I want to be an encouragement, which I do, whatever. But two simple words: I want to add value. Whether that's a blog post, whether that's a quote. I mean, I think quotes to me tend to really drive a lot. Like people, I think, like a good quote, whether it's, a historical person, it's God's word, it's, some author, whatever. I think quotes carry a lot of weight. But have I done something that's going to add value to that person's life? And part of where that comes from is I do that when I meet with someone. I mean, I've said to people, if I didn't add value to your life right now, I just wasted your time. And not only did I waste your time, I wasted mine. So I want to bring something to the table that gave value to them. How do you think that works? Like what in your estimation, I mean, because I don't think either one of you guys are guys that you're taking more off the table than you're putting on. I mean, I think, I'm friends with both of you. I see on social media, you guys are adding value. I mean, I said that, I think you heard me say it earlier, Caleb, I did the Tony impersonation of my parking lot update from Restoration Centerville when I was there the other night, because I love his Sunday morning parking lot update that I try to catch every Sunday morning. But I don't think anybody's necessarily going out of their way to try to say my platform is to be negative, and yet that happens. So what do you think happens? Where have you ever maybe kind of wrestled with, like, am I getting kind of funky here? Or
so I mean, one thing I would go with that is there's the documentary, right? The Social Dilemma.
Oh, yeah.
It's called.
Yeah,
Right?
I still haven't seen it.
I've actually not watched it. I'm curious to watch it. So I think I would probably agree with quite a bit of the premise of it. However, one thing I think we love to do as people is we love to assign blame on something else that's not within our own heart.
Come on,
so
preach.
like we're like, oh man, the country's so divided because it's news media's fault. Do they force us to sit in front of our TVs?
I totally disagree.
No, they don't. We turn our TVs on, we sit down, and we watch it, and then we blame the stinking news media when we're the ones who just sat there and watched it. And I think
real quick, one of my favorite quotes with that is I love the quote about we judge other people by their actions, we judge ourselves by our intent, and I think that fits real well with what you're saying.
Right? Yeah, I don't really mean that, but I think so. Social media, the same thing happens. We like to, and I would agree that it's an environment with the algorithms and everything. If you say something really controversial, then your uncle you've not talked to in 6 years, he comments on it too, and then your other friend comments on it, and they go at each other, and of course the more comments, the more and more people see it and all of that. So it kind of does drive that, but it also shows something that's in our hearts. And right now, anytime, but especially in this season of life, there's a lot of people that are anxious, and there's a lot of people that are stressing out and are worried. And so I agree. I don't think they're intentionally saying, let me add negativity to Facebook. I don't think almost anybody goes with that. But negativity is a playground in their mind and in their life. And Facebook is where they're typing what they're thinking and feeling. And then boom, it's there and it plays off.
So how does it play out more? Like, Tony, how do you think? Is it more the influences of what's there just bring out the negative in you? Or do you think people are saying, well, I need to get a reaction, and then it just kind of takes on its own life from that reaction that you get?
So do you know what they call these people on social media? They call them trolls, right? And so I've been trolled before by some really cool people, by people that have done a good job of trolling me. And this is what I'll tell you, is that I don't think anyone ever wakes up and it's like, man, it's Wednesday, I'm in Springfield, today's a good day to be a troll. Right? But if we think about the metaphor of a troll, what do? They live under a bridge, and then they get resentful when somebody walks on their bridge, right? And I think that that's what happens in social media, that they're living in a space, and in that space everything is fine. It's their life, and then all of a sudden they see somebody who they feel like is walking on their bridge, right? And that bridge may be politics, right? That bridge may be sports. That bridge may be marital stuff. That bridge may be anything, right? And all of a sudden somebody's walking on my bridge. Whoa, what are you doing walking on my bridge, right? Not only do I need to stop you from walking on my bridge, I need to convince you that you don't want anything to do with this bridge for the rest of your life. Why? Because I've been waiting. I've been waiting for someone to walk on my bridge. Right, and now all of a sudden I've got this ability to let them know everything I've ever thought about my bridge, why you should never walk on it again, why I'm right and you're wrong, and you know what? By the time I'm done, you might even agree with me and come underneath this bridge.
And even post a supporting article.
Right, from Wikipedia, right? Like, it's super reliable.
I do love Wikipedia. I'm gonna be honest. I love it.
Listen, there's value, right? But all I'm saying is, like, I don't think anyone thinks that they're being a troll. I think they're just protecting their bridge. Because oftentimes we just can't see ourselves that way. And if you don't have somebody in your life to pull you aside, like, man, you sound like a troll. What do you know? Now, are there evil people in the world? Sure. Are they going to be mean? Absolutely. You want to know the surefire way to test that? Do a paid promotional ad. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
All the fun stuff in.
If you put a paid promotional ad on Facebook or Instagram, you will get trolled. I think these people just do it as sport. You just get trolled.
Well, let's speak to the positivity of it, because I mean, like I said, adding value is kind of my big thing, what I'm thinking through when I post. So I do say I'm also good where I'm going to take my shots and be politically incorrect and let people get mad at me is when I trash Ohio State football or something about the Buckeyes. I love some of the Buckeyes. I mean, Clark Kellogg's been a breakfast speaker for us twice. William White, I'm a big Herb Street fan. I can go on, but I do like to take some shots at the Buckeyes. Being an SEC guy,
sure.
Tell people I'm a missionary to teach people in Ohio about Tennessee and what a great state it is, and or SEC football and SEC basketball in the right year. But talk about, like, I'm sure you guys do. Do you guys get notes from people who are like, man, Caleb, Tony, I love how you stand for this, or I love how you share your heart like this, or man, you've really ministered to me like this? Because I'm guessing, I've gotten stuff like that from somebody I went to high school with, or an old Young Life kid, or whatever. So I know there's good. And I think sometimes even in this kind of conversation, we could focus on what's negative and talk against or anti whatever versus talking positive about, man, here's how I've had ministry on this thing. Yeah. Caleb, what about you? You're looking at Tony, but I bet you've got some good notes headed your way.
Yeah, I mean, so in the last 4 or 5 months, there have been times I've thought, am I being more counterproductive than helpful, and should I just not post anything on Facebook? Like, I've actually thought, should I just kind of hang out and not post anything for a while? But inevitably, someone randomly will just shoot a quick note and be like, hey, like, thanks so much for your posts. They're really encouraging. And there's that reminder, okay, actually putting something encouraging, helpful, truthful out there is benefiting people. And sometimes it's hard for us to remember that, because just like being a pastor, right? You get the hate mail fast sometimes.
Sure.
And the people who think you're doing a pretty good job, a lot of times don't say anything. So I've been encouraged to know, okay, there are people that are being, one cool example of the power of social media is a church I know had their drums and their soundboard and stuff stolen. I just made a post about it and said, hey man, this pastor's been so faithful. They're praying to bless whoever it is that took the stuff. And I had 2 different people say, hey, I've got a drum set, I've got some sound equipment, do they need anything? So it can be used for good. It is being used for good.
People discount those kind of opportunities.
Let's not lose it in the midst of all there's a mess, but yeah, let's not lose that.
Yeah. We did a Zoom thing right after COVID started. Me and my neighbor Scott Green, who was a previous guest on here, and we did this joke night thing, dad joke night thing. We each recruited 9 guys. We had 20 of us. You had to chip in so much money, and the winning team and the winning person got to do two different things. You could do whatever you wanted with the money. It could be a party, it could be something involving those guys with your team. And what they ended up doing was they're a couple who both were in retail and fast food and food industry, whatever, and they were out of work, and they had all that money. I think they raised like $800 for this couple. And it was like, that's all because there's a thing called Zoom. And it was wonderful. Not the TV show, which we talked about earlier. But Tony, what about you? Where have you had opportunities that it's like, wow, this is really worth me being on here and having a voice and a platform?
So I think for me, like one of the things that I've realized is that there are a lot of barriers to relationships for people. And so through social media, we get a foretaste of a real relationship. It's not a real relationship, let's be clear. I'm not suggesting that. But what you get is an opportunity to meet and engage with someone who you wouldn't normally otherwise. And my favorite medium obviously is the podcast. And when we post a podcast out there and I get some feedback about how it impacted somebody's life, or somebody writes a review, or it's just like I consider it just an affirmation of that, man, there are so many people out there who are willing to be vulnerable with their stories, and vulnerable stories make everything stronger.
Oh, I think I said in a previous podcast, if you want to have a song that's a big hit, do something about forgiveness. Do something about people's brokenness. Like, yeah, we all want that. I'm curious about this guy. I want to listen to your podcast from this week because I know you had a guy bald-headed guy, facial hair. I'm like, it had about 50% of America who looked like that guy, but it sounded like he had a really cool story about brokenness and
Patrick Schwenk, and he experienced some miscarriages and then cancer, and he wrote a book called A Boat in the Middle of the Lake, and it's about him and his wife Ruth, and he's a pastor in Michigan, and just he got diagnosed with a cancer that was not supposed to be for someone his age, and his journey through that, and it was like, whew, get you in all the feels kind of like places, and it's pretty incredible, And the fact that he would use those words and then be brave enough to tell that story in person, it's really going to impact some people's lives.
By the way, I told you the other night, I'm picking up some Tony-isms.
Yeah.
The word feels getting in there.
Getting in the
Caleb,
feels.
if you need to ever imitate Tony,
All the feels.
he likes to say something about all the feels. Those are his kind of things. I'm picking up some things
my
from
team
him.
oftentimes reminds me of the statements that I make on a fairly regular basis. I'm in the feels. I'm here for it. Or tell me more about that.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I say all the time to my team. Yeah. Tell me more about that.
See, something you said earlier when you talked about, you didn't want to make something too much about relationships knowing they're not real on social media. We say that a lot, but I think you alluded to something that we don't focus enough on. And there's people we would just never keep in contact with without Twitter, without Instagram, without Facebook. One of the things I love, and you think about this in a 3D video picture kind of way, is when I look at Caleb, I see you as a guy who you're a unifier. You're bringing, in a picture, you can have a picture with white guy, black guy, white woman, black woman, young, old, whatever it is. You're just a guy who's around a lot of different people. And if there was not social media, there wasn't the video, there wasn't the picture, that wouldn't be told. So maybe speak a little bit more to that, Caleb, as far as how that fits in your world and being positive and productive with what your platform is and ministry therein.
Yeah. I would agree with what Tony was saying there, and then just all the feels, man. But so a genuine deep relationship, COVID or no COVID, like the people, I can almost promise some of the people who you're the most close to in life, you have seen since COVID. Those are the people you're going to value and prioritize and spend time with and meet up for coffee somewhere.
And as you should.
As you should, exactly. So I don't think social media is even made for that. So like, do I have 3,000 friends on Facebook? But not really. And I'm totally fine with that. But it can still be a blessing in sharing, here's something that's happening, here's something God's doing, just here's something that's happening in my life that more people can see and just get a touch of it and get a glimpse of. And as long as they're not relying on that instead of their personal relationships, as long as that's not their only lifeline to encouragement and this is their substitute for a relationship because they've broken relationships elsewhere, if they realize what it is, and it's just like, there's people I see their stuff, like we don't talk on the phone hardly ever, but I'll see stuff every once in a while, that's pretty cool. Like, man, look what God's doing at Restoration, like, I love seeing that. Yeah. I'll throw a like on that.
It's interesting about what you're saying. So there was a former kid of mine when I was doing Springfield City Youth Mission who, I keep up with a bunch of those kids, which I would never keep up with without social media. I wouldn't see him. I wouldn't whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
And so this one kid's he's older now. He was going through a pretty tough marital thing. I saw a post of his, and I felt like the Lord said, reach out to him. So I did. He was pretty quick to reply. That Saturday morning, I was speaking at a men's breakfast in Centerville. We spent like the whole day together. Like, Do we have a real relationship based on social media? Not really. But because we are on social media, we connected. I sent him a note. We had some dialogue. I said, hey, what are you doing Saturday morning? I'm free. We literally, I think I picked him up at like 6:45. We met at like Starbucks, went down to Centerville. I'm a big Costco guy. I got to go to Costco. I'm in Centerville. Went to Winans or whatever. We hit several places. I mean, we literally hung out.
You went to Costco the time you came and visit me in Centerville, too.
I'm always at Costco.
When are we doing a podcast on that?
Well, we could do that. Makisa McCullum, who is related to our friend Seth over here, he could help make that happen because I love Makisa, and let's do it at Costco sometime. Caleb would probably do that. He's got a big enough family. But anyway, it was just neat. And I think we so discount what's not relationship on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever. We don't take into account what breathes relationship. Speak to that, neither one of you.
Well, I was reminded of the Craig Rochelle quote that trust is given and mistrust is earned. Right? Trust is given, mistrust is earned. This is also a statement I use with all my kids a lot. And the truth is what you do on your platform, social media, podcast, whatever, is what people are learning about you. And so have we given people a reason to trust us with what we're posting? Have we given people a reason to reach out? Have we given people a reason to see? Essentially what we're doing with our platform is we're giving people windows into our lives.
Accessibility. I was thinking as you were talking accessibility.
Accessibility, right? So, if you're in a season of life where you're trolling or you're defending your position with rigor and contempt, then I think people are going to make some assumptions about you, right? And right or wrong, I'm not going to put judgment on it, but it's just going to happen. And so, we have the opportunity to earn trust of people who might need a helping hand, if that's what you're in the business of doing, right? Like if you're in the business of wanting to help people, if you're a Christ follower, if you're working on your relationship and you're looking for a way to serve people, there's a lot of opportunities on social media.
For time's sake, let me kind of short circuit this and go another direction because I was thinking of Caleb with this one particularly. So we would all three obviously agree biblically, worldview, following Jesus, there is absolute truth. I know for me when I put things out there, besides the fact I want to add value, wherever I can, I want to put something that's like, that's truth, period. Not even in a mic drop kind of way, but more just like, this is true. So like a post I just had today that, I'm sure somebody's going to find this controversial. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I think this is something I need reminded of. We all need reminded of. And I pulled it up. Somebody had shared this the other day. And I really like this. It said, Kamala is beloved. Donald is fearfully and wonderfully made. Yes, we know which Donald they're talking about there. Mike is cherished. Joe is important enough that I died for him. Quote, Christ Jesus, hashtag Jesus 2020. And I thought, now, is somebody going to find that controversial? I guess so. But I'm like, you know what? I need to see myself that way. We need to see political figures that way. I mean, I don't care who the person is. Athlete, an LA Dodger, a Tampa Bay Ray, a Laker, a Miami Heat. I mean, whoever it is, we need to see that truth. And I thought that's the truth. People can debate that all they want or think, well, that's Jeff's, that's God's word. I mean, that's the truth. And so how much do you think through, like, I want to put truth out there?
I think that quite a bit. So a couple of things tie into the answer. One is, if you're in a real life room of people, before you say something, you think about who's in that room and you're talking to that audience. So if I'm in a room of people who I know agree with me that Jesus is Lord, then I'll start with assumptions. We all believe that. We might talk about Christianese terms because but if I'm in a room of people that different faiths and we're serving together, I'll use different words. I'm still the same person. But I think a lot of times that people underestimate on social media is you're talking to all 3,000 people in the room at the same time. You're not actually really sure which ones you're talking to. Some will see this post, right. Some will see that post, but it could be any of those 3,000. So with that, I've tried to walk this line of kind of this truth and grace line of this is where I come from. I do believe Jesus is Lord. I believe that he's the only way to heaven, salvation, eternal life, all of that. But I also realize I have a lot of friends who don't. And I think one of the places, this is outside just the platform of social media, but just in life, that I see sometimes generationally, sometimes I'll see older Christians kind of throw out, like, everybody should believe that Jesus is God. And I just realized, like, I do believe that Jesus is God. But I realize there's a whole lot of Americans that don't believe that. And me saying it louder isn't going to make that person who doesn't believe it change their mind. So I'm fine walking to a place saying, hey, I believe this. I realize I have friends who don't. That's cool with me. Like, I believe this, and I'm putting it out there. But I try not put it out there as everybody else is wrong if they don't. This is just what I believe. Yeah. And you have to figure out where you're at.
Tony?
I've never seen somebody come to Christ by waving a Bible at them at Paul Brown Stadium. I used to go to Bengals games all the time when we could do that sort of thing. And there's always the evangelists out there who are doing their work, and God's called them to something like that. But it seems so kind of loud and angry, right? And that may work for some people, but what I've found is kind of the same as you. Like, hey, if I'm going to bring someone to Jesus, it's probably not going to end with my social media. It may start with social media, but it's going to end with this, right? With this, it's going to end with, being relational and doing my very best to show them who Christ is, just one-on-one.
Well, don't you think we use a lot of things in life where it's kind of a circular motion graph, chart, whatever, where it's like, here's who I am, here's what I'm trying to be about. There's social media, brings it back to me, brings it back to, social media is not everything, but I think we do need to realize, when people do hey, I'm checking out, I can't deal with this, I'm going to be off for a month. And I'm always curious when they do that, like how long are they truly gone for? Like they're back 2 days later. Wow, that was a long month or whatever. But I think all those things kind of flow. Like I want to be the same person here that I am there, that I am. And I think, I think you guys model that well. Is there any other lasting thought? Hey, I want to ask, I guess we got to throw in a gathering thing. You guys both just visited your first locker room. Speaking of our platform with the gathering, what was your take on your locker room first experience today?
A group of guys being authentic, pouring into each other. I think it's a great definition of church.
We really like that Eric Maddock guy. Didn't you think he was really cool? The
Incredible,
guy put on this podcast for us right now. Eric was great.
Absolutely.
What was your take? Caleb, you've been to some other stuff. You've been to Young Guns and spoken at a lunch series. What stood out to you about a locker room?
Yeah, I think in any season, God created people to connect with other people. And I think men sometimes are the group of people who do that maybe the least well. And pre-COVID, right? Just in general, men truly connect with men. So I've always appreciated the venues and spaces that the gathering has been able to help create for men to genuinely connect with one another. And I think this season has just emphasized that even more in a time where people can feel isolated. We've got to have just as much we need to be physically healthy and physically safe. Amen. We've got to have a group of people that we're genuinely connecting with, sharing life with, having conversations with, so that we're actually emotionally, spiritually healthy and safe as well.
Well, I think it's pretty fair to say anybody that's seen this understands why these guys are heroes, good friends, guys. I respect guys. I've been stuck by this Dallas Willard quote lately about when he was nearing the end of his life or whatever. Somebody said, do you have any regrets? And he said, I have several. He goes, the one that really stands out is, I wish I would have spent time with less people. And I've been thinking a lot about what that means and what does that mean in my life. And I would say if I spent time with less people and two of those guys were you guys, I would be very well off for that. So, hey, coming up, friends, we've got Stephen Mansfield on our next podcast in 2 weeks. My friend Ray Willis will be co-hosting that with me. He's been a guy we've used in locker rooms. Well, really more in Young Guns, podcast guy himself. He's got two Great Man podcast and the Stephen Mansfield one. Then on November 18th, we got one of my heroes of the faith, Bob Russell. Used to pastor Southeast Christian Church. Then it was handed down to Dave Stone, then Kyle Eidelman. They're blowing up down in Louisville, Kentucky. December 2nd, we got Dave Pasch from ESPN, who does college football. He does NFL games for the Arizona Cardinals, NBA college basketball. He has to call games with Bill Walton. Can you imagine Bill Walton, the crazy man he is, that Dave Pasch does that with him. December 16th, we've got the Promise Keepers president, Vance Day, who I just got to spend time with. Great guy, former judge. Great story. And then for my friends who love the Cleveland Browns are out there watching that team. Tony, what do you think about the Cleveland Browns?
This could get kind of, speaking of
This
could get
ugly.
We've done great so far.
Yeah.
Let's not go off the rails.
I'm a Bengals fan, but if the Bengals can't win, I'm glad when the Browns are doing pretty well.
I thought you were going to say when the Bengals can't win, I'm glad the Browns can't win either, something like that. But anyway, we've got Andre
I was trying
Davis.
to be politically correct. Oh, Davis.
Andre Davis
Nice.
is a guy we'll point you to because he's got an incredible family story. They have like 23, 24 people every Friday night in Delaware that get together and do dinner and whatever else. So Andre Davis will be with us December 30th, and I might have a Cleveland Browns fan and my son or another buddy of mine who might help co-host that one. So thanks again for joining us. Caleb, you can find him, Google that, Declare Dayton, maybe even though it's not technically called that, to find out more about Caleb. And then Tony Miltonberger at the Reclamation Podcast, Restoration Church Centerville. Don't get Reclamation and Restoration mixed up. Podcast Project Church. he can be found. With a name like Miltonberger, all you got to do is type in Tony Miltonberger. Trust me, it'll get you to the right place.
There's me and one guy in Seattle who sells commercial real estate. Seems like he's doing really well, though.
There you go. Well, maybe you need to have him on a podcast.
Well, I thought about it.
After he shared the upcoming list, I feel like we didn't qualify to be on this list.
know,
of
didn't
podcasts. What?
I was like,
Dave and Bob and
I
Vance
wasn't
and
a professional
Andre.
model though, so there
That's
is
true.
that.
We'll have to do that on another podcast. These guys want to be you guys. So anyway, have a great day, folks. Thanks for joining us.